ES Audio.
Hello, this is the Evening Standard Theatre Podcast. I'm Nick Curtis, the Chief Theatre Critic.
I'm Nancy Durrant, the Culture Editor.
And I'm Nick Clark, the Deputy Culture Editor. Coming up on the show, we're going to review The Effect at the National Theatre. Starring Paapa Essiedu and Taylor Russell, this play is by Lucy Prebble and is directed by Jamie Lloyd.
For our second review, it's The Wizard of Oz. With music by Andrew Lloyd Webber and Tim Rice, this musical stars Georgina Onwurah as Dorothy, Jason Manford as the Cowardly Lion, and Ashley Banjo as the Tin Man.
And we'll be joined by Shaun, Escoffery and George Asprey, who play Mufasa and Scar in The Lion King.
I think the funniest thing that's happened for me was when my youngest daughter, Connie, came to see the show for the first time. She was 4 years old. And Mufasa's climbing the rock and Scar goes, "Long live the king," and pushes him off. And there's, Scar. And he goes, and then there's silence while he's dead on the floor. And suddenly this little voice went, "My daddy did that."
2023 marks 15 years of them playing Scar and Mufasa in the West End. Welcome back to the Evening Standard Theatre Podcast. So, what's happened in theatre news this week?
Rebecca Lucy Taylor, a.k.a. Self-Esteem, and Jake Shears, of Scissor Sisters fame, are going to be joining Cabaret as, what's a blasted name? You know.
Sally Bowles.
Thank you.
Sally Bowles and the MC.
The MC.
Yeah.
It's like super exciting.
It is. It's a really shrewd bit of casting, that, isn't it? They really are working extremely hard to refresh Cabaret and keep it.
They keep knocking out the park. You keep wanting to go back and see the new iterations of the cast, don't you?
Yeah,
I know.
I would be curious to see these two do it, I have to admit. It does remind me of the days in the past when Chicago was on and they sort of updated the cast of that every 6 months.
Slightly less stunty. It's not like David Hasselhoff's going to turn up in this, is it?
You never know. It depends how long it runs. Really, they'll get round to him eventually, I should think. But all of us will play the MC or Sally Bowles at some point in the future. Either that or we'll be in 222 A Ghost Story, one or the other. Exactly. We all have to take our choice at some point, toss a coin.
It's funny, people are always people have been a bit snooty about the 222 stunt casting, but never with the Cabaret, funnily enough. And I just think it's all to the good. It brings in new audiences. It brings people in. I mean, this is going to be a hot ticket as soon as Self-Esteem gets in there.
The absurdity about Sally Bowles, of course, is that she's supposed to be a dreadful singer.
Yeah,
she's supposed to be
they're all amazing.
Really not very good. So having her and Liza Minnelli and Jessie Buckley, play
incredible.
her is just sort of daft. But what are you going to do with a musical?
And she's one hell of a performer. I saw her live at the Apollo, and it was incredible, and it's really theatrical as well. Like, I've never seen her act. I don't know whether she's done much of it or any of it before.
I've no idea whether Jake Shears can act either.
Not a clue.
And I think this lays down the challenge to Broadway for their first production of Cabaret, as it goes over who is going to be their casting.
Who's it going to be? Oh, it's got to be massive.
That's what I was thinking. It has to be.
Who would your bets be on?
I don't know.
Tom Cruise and
well, somebody
Meryl
was saying
Streep.
it should really be Cillian Murphy and Margot Robbie. That would
that would have been great.
That would have been perfect. Dressed ideally as Barbie and Oppenheimer,
And
doing it that way.
I would watch the shit out of that.
Yeah, exactly. Fly over to Broadway.
Watch that up the wazoo. I definitely would. Yes, yeah, definitely. I just wanted to quickly drop in on an update on last week's podcast when we couldn't review La Cage aux Folles because rain stopped play. I then went back 2 days later, the day after we recorded the podcast. I'm slightly surprised by the sort of raves that this got. It's just extended by 2 weeks on the back of those rave reviews. I think it's obviously hitting a sweet spot, striking a sort of the right note at the moment. I think, with its message of tolerance and being who you are, I think at a time of rising intolerance, it feels like a timely revival. I still think, Nancy, you and I were there for the first 40 minutes on press night before the downpour began. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that we both sort of felt the singing and dancing is pretty good, but the acting is really not up to scratch.
No,
and there just aren't enough. There isn't enough sort of sense of genuine relationships there going on.
Yeah, I mean, I liked the central relationship more than you did, I think, but some of the acting around it was, there was some that was like really bad.
Yes, it's true.
Genuinely bad, and I don't know whether that got better or not.
It didn't particularly. Maybe slightly better. I think just the sheer fact that it was a sunny night rather than they were performing in drizzle slightly cranked up the energy a little bit. But, the good thing about if you get beyond 50 minutes is that if you're only there for 50 minutes, what you get is We Are What We Are, a slightly arch version of the great anthem, I Am What I Am, which gave Pride basically its signature tune, didn't it? If you stick beyond the 50-minute mark, you actually get I Am What I Am as the first act closer, and that is a real big moment.
Yeah, it's a stonker. It's a stonker.
Yeah.
I'm sad that I missed that.
And the title number, La Cage aux Folles, is also a great, great Broadway number. So, I mean, I was a little bit lukewarm on it, but it's definitely, as I say, it's definitely hitting the right spot at this moment in time.
And it's a sunny, glittery, kind of fun camp night
and the
out,
dance
which
routines
is a joy.
are amazing. I mean, there's a reason why they had to cancel it because of the rain, because these sort of cantering drag queens on high heels really do knock it out of the park. Quite literally, this being in a park.
Very good. On the more sort of sober side of things, it's been a week where there's been a lot of talk about artistic leadership in theatre. We've talked a lot about artistic directors, the turnover in London, but also around the country. And, there's been more departures. Will Gompertz has been announced as leaving the Barbican. And Shuba Das from the Liverpool Playhouse and Everyman.
That was only after 18 months as well, which asks some questions.
There's been a lot of talk out there on social media and the newspapers about leading theatres and about actually the burnout and stress of running a theatre as well. Actually, one person I'd like to point to particularly who has really interesting thoughts on this is Tarek Iskander, who runs the Battersea Arts Centre. Yeah. He did an extraordinary series of tweets about all the pressures facing all cultural institutions, I would say, but particularly theatres as well, post-COVID. And everything they face. And it's really worth going to check out, actually, because it lays out pretty starkly the horrendous pressures and how difficult it is. And it's sort of coming from all sides, really. Yeah. Even though there's some brilliant stuff on all over the country.
We feel like audiences are coming back, don't we? But actually... This is a bit of a crisis moment because the well is dry because everybody spent all their money over the pandemic and, and they've spent the money that they were given in emergency and, and it's going to take time to make the money back and sort of build up the funding again. And I just think it's, with the cuts in funding and what seems like chaos at the Arts Council, I feel like inflation, cost, all of that.
Absolutely, because a lot of these middle-ranking jobs and even the higher-ranking ones are not really that well paid.
Oh, no.
Particularly if
the
you're
arts
coming
in this
into
country,
if you're coming into America, it's freelance career.
Bonkers.
Yes,
well,
it's
and
true.
Europe. So one to keep an eye on, but I'd certainly recommend people go and search out that thread.
Yeah, indeed. And support. Go to your local theatre.
Yes, go to your local theatre. I'll go to far afield theatre. Go to a new theatre, somewhere else in town.
On that note,
exactly. I think it might be time for our first review, which is The Effect at the National Theatre.
You asked to see the scans of the volunteers with the greatest effect. Are you interested in who they are?
Of course.
Like two very different clinical histories, backgrounds, genders even, but they have one thing in common. They're both involved in an intense and protracted flirtation with each other.
Right, this is Lucy Prebble's 2012 play, which was originally staged at the Cottesloe Theatre, which is now the Dorfman, at the National, with Billie Piper in the female lead role. It was written sort of for and with her. She and Lucy Prebble have this sort of symbiotic creative relationship. Piper is more than a muse to Prebble, but they created Secret Diary of a Call Girl together. They created I Hate Susie together.
Which was,
yes,
anxiety,
which was extraordinary.
Wow, I Hate Susie too.
I don't think it's giving anything away to say that Lucy Prebble, who is also now, of course, was a writer on Succession, has written this partly to address periods of depression in her own life or problems of poor mental health. This is a play about a couple who are taking part in a trial on a new antidepressant drug who fall in love. Is it them? Are they really in love? Is it the effect of the drug? How much can we trust our own minds? Why do we trust medication rather than the sort of chemical imbalances that seem to naturally or unnaturally occur in our own heads? This has been revived by the great Jamie Lloyd, who I'm a bit of a stand for. This time, the Billie Piper role is played by Taylor Russell. To me, an unknown quantity. This is her stage debut. She's a Canadian actress, was in the TV reboot of Lost in Space and in Bones and All,
the
cannibalism romantic comedy.
Yeah, with Timothée Chalamet.
Yes, indeed. And here her opposite number is Paapa Essiedu.
And it's been updated, hasn't it? Lucy Prebble has updated very specific bits.
Absolutely.
She's sort of rewritten his character particularly to suit him. I didn't see it the first time around, but was that character... I don't know why I think this, but he was like from somewhere else specific. I can't remember. He was Irish or something like that.
I think that's right. It was John Joe O'Neill who played it, so I think
yeah,
he may
so
well
that
have
makes
been
a lot
Irish.
of sense.
Now
Yeah.
he's from Hackney.
I
Yeah,
can
now
barely
he's from
remember, but
Hackney.
now he's very
It's very-
definitely a Hackney lad, isn't he?
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
except, beyond that, they could be from out of space. I mean, it's sort of set this dystopian sci-fi setting. For me, I found the mentions of Hackney. I thought, wow, this feels like another world to me.
There's nothing
Yeah.
like matching tracksuits to make everything sort of feel a bit scary, is it?
It's true. It's very monochrome, isn't it? They are in matching grey tracksuits.
Yeah.
The two doctors, Michelle Austin and Cobner Holbrook Smith, are in sort of varying shades of sort of charcoal and gunmetal. I love Michelle Austin as well. I mean, I think she could actually sort of wither your ego at 50 paces just with a well-turned phrase.
But with a smile as well. It was wonderful. And I thought Cobner Holbrook Smith was sort of fantastically oily.
Yes.
Sort of like that
That's
wonderful
exactly
kind of
what I
like the ego of the charming, clever man.
I stole a
really
line from
brilliant.
my friend Nick Toyas, which was that he'd lick himself if he could.
That's exactly what it was like.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
so good.
And it was leaving this trail of destruction in his wake, but he just doesn't realise
Yeah,
it. He thinks
exactly.
everything's for the greater good, but
Yes.
sort of personal and also with these pharma trials. He's just
Yeah.
pushing on and leaving.
But then
this-
when he can't fix something, you can see how lost he is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really
I found
good.
that
I thought
the-
they were just all so good.
I agree. I found that the least convincing character, but I think he's a terrific actor, Cobner, and I think he did a terrific job with it. So, and it's very, very starkly lit. It's staged in a traverse staging, so a big sort of landing strip down the centre of the two banks of seating, lit from beneath and lit very starkly from
I think that's a
above.
real masterstroke. I've never seen the Littleton like that. I
neither,
walked
no.
in and was immediately sort
Throws
of,
you totally,
yeah,
doesn't
and
it?
then it's so clever because this is about a scientific experiment about an observation of two people, and then you realise it's observation of all four of them. But actually, it feels like you are watching an experiment. You're seeing the other observers on the other side, but like glinting off their glasses. I think it could be sort of a sign. Science.
The glasses are a really noticeable
I really
thing, aren't
noticed
they?
it.
And it makes them sort of faceless and
it's-
slightly mask-like, and adds to the sort
Yeah,
of
and I really found it just adds to that claustrophobia. The set is really claustrophobic. I found it.
I know,
really
despite being completely open.
Yes.
Which is fascinating.
I mean, as the play does, it really makes you think about your own body and sort of makes you claustrophobic within yourself. I think I found my skin crawling about certain bits when they're describing how the brain works and how you breathe and how it controls certain functions. And you think, wow, but also the claustrophobia of this enclosed space with the audience on either side and the doctors viewing from either side as well. It's all about observation and I thought it's so brilliant. I think Jamie Lloyd he's got it. This guy knows what he's doing, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I thought the writing was brilliant and very funny. It looked very clever. Occasionally a bit too theatrical, if you know what I mean. A bit too, you couldn't see it on film. It was very stagey, I found, the way people interacted.
Yeah.
But the way that Paapa Essiedu managed to bring that round and humanise it, his mannerisms, it was so real in a setting that is not real.
Well,
It
that's
feels
it.
completely
I think
out of-
that sort of stylized production, coupled with what was extremely naturalistic acting for each actor, every time someone handed something to someone, they didn't move.
Yes.
They said, "Oh, here it is," and they might look slightly to the left, like where the thing was, but they wouldn't pretend to hand anything
Yeah.
to you.
Here's
so
my phone, and there'd be
and
no indication
no
of-
indication
Yes.
in terms of the
of the phone
movement
or-
Yeah.
that's what they were doing. So it was a very deliberate stylization contrasted with the way that they were acting, and I thought it was really effective in giving it this sort of strange, not otherworldly, but just like, again, you're in an experiment, you don't really know what's real. Giving it that sort of aspect, I thought that worked.
Yeah.
I thought that worked really well.
It left me sort of weirdly impressed rather than moved somehow.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I found it very interesting, but I wasn't moved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised I wasn't moved because I like I say, I think the two actors here are fantastic. I mean, Paapa Essiedu, he just seems to shift with every single thing I've seen him
I
do.
haven't ever seen him do anything bad.
No, exactly.
I thought it had really interesting ideas in it. Sort of, what is love? Is it all about chemicals? That feels like a terribly nihilistic viewpoint, doesn't it? And one that I think people find it almost impossible to contemplate. How can we be? How can this thing that we feel, this extremely beautiful thing, basically just be something to do with what's going on in a bag of chemicals, which is our body? But then, you look at the other side, And this question is dealt with as well. What is depression? Is that all about chemicals? And that is a much more palatable idea.
Yeah.
These horrible feelings, they should be manageable and they're not related to who you are as a person. But we can't bear the idea that the beautiful feelings are like that. And you can't really have one without the other. So it's a really thorny question. Dr. James, who's played by Michelle Austin, she's a depressive who has refused treatment in the past and still refuses it. But when she says, "Oh, it's just me," like I don't need drugs, it's just me. This is me. About when she's in the thick of a depressive episode, and often has been suicidal. It feels really transgressive. It's radical.
She
it's
has
dangerous.
a great line, which is, "I don't think we're ill. I think we're right."
Yeah, I know. And you're like, "Oh God!"
The depression is a perfectly rational response to the
world.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it's kind of hard to. It's hard to argue
to gainsay that. Really, isn't it? The show started quite late on press night, and I was thinking it must be someone quite famous coming in.
Yeah, I mean, what you mean, in addition to Paul Mescal, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Tom Hiddleston, Zoe Ashton,
so she is supposed to be dating Harry Styles.
Yes, yes, I think we are legally obliged to mention that.
Yeah, I think we are. I think we are journalists, and therefore it's in our contracts we have to mention these things. I think they went public after this, supposedly, that this was the sort of big thing, that she'd appeared at his concerts before, possibly just as a fan, but if he turns up to the opening of a sort of radical restaging of a 10-year-old
play,
you know
what, brilliant. Let's hope that brings in more
brings
audience.
the fans in. Harry Styles saves theatre.
Welcome to our world, Harry Styles.
Yes, exactly.
Right, let's go to a quick break. Coming up, I'll be at the Lyceum Theatre with Shaun Escoffery and George Asprey for The Lion King.
Hello, my name is Charlie Stemp, and you are listening to the Evening Standard Theatre Podcast.
Joining me today are George Asprey and Shaun Escoffery, who are starring in The Lion King at the Lyceum Theatre. George plays Scar and Shaun is Mufasa, and they have just celebrated an extraordinary 15 years in the role. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
So, 15 years in a show is pretty rare. It's an extraordinary thing. When I found out about your story, I mean, tell me, what's it like to have one role and be in one show for that long?
You know what? It's one of those things where it's only when you look back, you go, oh my gosh, we've done 15 years, The whole journey has been absolutely quite wonderful, to be fair. And,
Did you join at the same time, or was it sort of slightly staggered?
On the same day.
On the same day?
On the same day. And I remember the first day I met him, I just thought, this guy's a complete nutcase, and I'm really going to get on with him. It was at Table Read the first time I met you. And so we had to kind of, do our thing. We had to go through the whole script. And the ensemble stood up and started singing the opening scene. I mean, it blew us away. We both looked at each other like thinking, oh my gosh, this is absolutely amazing. And then George kind of comes up to me, whispers, he goes, well, that's a miscast. And I thought, right, we're going to get on. So in truth, it's been an absolutely wonderful experience. And, as all things, we have your ups and downs, but with The Lion King, it's been more ups than definitely downs,
Do you know how many performances you've done?
I think it's over 5,000.
Yeah, that's about right.
After 5,000 performances, are you still able to find new things in? I mean, when does the character sort of get set in stone?
Honestly, there's things that you find constantly, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Obviously, hopefully, your performance is of a standard that you're not trying to sort of change the script or anything like that, but you're just tiny little subtle things. And I came up with one thing the other night. It was in the confrontation scene at the end, where I suddenly thought, how has it taken me 15 years to realize that? I mean, what kind of an idiot am I that I haven't seen that in the last 15 years? And because you know the script so well and because you know the character so well, it actually gives you a freedom to invest at that every show a tiny, tiny bit more and to discover things, new things all the time. Yeah,
and it's kind of great, you guys being best friends, but also in the show playing brothers, but sort of sworn enemies as well.
Yeah, I always say we're brothers on and off stage, but slightly better off stage than we are on.
It doesn't kill me.
No, in fact, you're the one who kills me. Yeah, when we train.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, we do jiu-jitsu, so yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we both train Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which we put mats down on stage in between shows on matinee days, and we roll on stage. So people are doing backstage tours and they go, here's a gazelle, here's a giraffe, here's Scar and Mufasa fighting on the floor.
Fighting on
and also Shaun's a lot better than I am at it. So he gets his revenge.
And that's obviously the beauty of live theatre. It does change. You can build on things and change things. I just wonder, are there moments that have gone wrong in these 5,000? Things that stand out possibly? Or
yes. So there's one time. I mean, there's loads, but the funniest one for me was not giving too much about the show, but it's Mufasa's falling back and Scar's killed him. I didn't actually hit the floor. Kind of just hovered there for quite a while. Do you know what I mean? So I didn't know whether I was alive or dead. Do you know what I mean? That's just one of millions of masks falling off during the confrontation.
I've wondered about that. What happened? What happened? How do you style that out?
Right, so actually George styles it out quite a number of times. So we go, is that a challenge? And so obviously our masks come out. And so my mask fell on the foot and rolled over there. And then George kind of looked up at me, we looked at each other, he goes, right, what we're going to do. So he walks over, picks up the mask, hands it back to me. I put it underneath my arm, and we carried on with the scene.
Mask falling off is a problem. When my mask fell off in confrontation, I had to use it almost like a drama school mask exercise. Like, this is my mask. I am presenting you with my face. It's that sort of thing. I think the funniest thing that's happened for me was when my youngest daughter, Connie, came to see the show for the first time. She was 4 years old. And it's the same scene actually, where Scar is on the and Mufasa's climbing the rock, and Scar goes, "Long live the king," and pushes him off, and there's Scar, and he goes, and then there's silence while he's dead on the floor, and suddenly this little voice went, "My daddy did that," and the whole audience just absolutely. Oh dear, it was
One question I haven't asked, you had kids in the same week?
Yes.
That was insane.
I mean, obviously, during the show, you both had paternity leave, right?
We did.
At the same time?
Well, it didn't actually quite work out like that. So it was just like one of those bizarre things. I said to you, it was after a drinks thing where I noticed that your wife wasn't drinking.
Yes.
And I said, is she? And you went, yeah. And I went, so is Kirsty. Then we had to go in to the company manager. And actually, Shaun said, Michelle, I've got something to tell you. And she was like, what's that? And, well, my wife's pregnant, so she's due at the beginning of December. She went, okay, George, why are you here? And I said, well, my wife's pregnant and she's due at the beginning of December. And the look on her face was, as it turned out, Farah, Shaun's daughter, decided to be very competitive and was born 2 months early. So we ended up not being off at the same time at all.
So you were due, the babies were due at the same time. But
so,
in the end, it wasn't.
So our plan didn't work.
We've got your masks in front of us here. They're such extraordinary things. I mean, the costumes, tell me about wearing these costumes and this extraordinary design.
Oh, I tell you, I mean, every night, I kind of look in the mirror just before I'm going to go downstairs and just see, the beauty and the detail in these masks, and the costume itself is just absolutely amazing. Yeah. The other thing is that it's so delicate. The amount of times I may have dropped it or damaged it, because it's quite high, and sometimes you have to bend down to kind of get through the door. So I hear a little crack on the top there. I'm like, oh man, but it transforms you. Because I mean, when I first started, it took a little while to get used to. And then after a while, you start to kind of morph into the character and realize just how kind of important it is to the piece. And so to perform without it, I feel completely naked.
Yeah. So you've seen the show. When my mask comes down, so it's almost like what Julie Taymor, who directed the show, calls the dual event, where you have the mask on top and you're the human form, and then you have the mask down and you're the animal form. And because the aspect of my mask can move as well as coming up and down, I can use it. So if I'm talking to you, when I go back, do you know what I mean? I can change the aspect of it. So it makes it much more expressive. Yeah. So it's another tool. And again, I'm finding new little things with the mask that I'm able to use. So that's another way of exploring the character. But the whole show is such a fusion of cultural styles, artistic styles from around the world. I mean, if you think you've got the South African music, you've got the Javanese dance movement, you've got Chinese shadow puppetry. I think that's why The Lion King has been so successful over the years.
And when you're on stage, are there moments each performance that you're like, yes, I'm really looking forward to this bit? Or are there moments where you're like, oh, get this bit over with?
The arc, sometimes, you know, because where I start underneath the stage. And I hear whoever's doing Rafiki Tenjue normally. And she'll sing that first note, nah, and I'm like, whoa. And the whole thing begins. You know, so there's a couple of spots in the show that does that for me. It's that beginning bit. And also when I turn around and I see George standing at the side, and I give him a little nod. He gives me a little nod, I say, yeah, we're ready for this, let's do this. That's what does it. And I'm like, right, let's do this now, you know?
I mean, it's the same for me. Every night, I'm not in Circle of Life, but I stand at the side of the stage and I watch the whole thing unfold before me. And no matter how tired you are, when you hear that, you just feel the hackles go up on the back of your neck, and you're just invigorated. And then, as Shaun says, he comes around on the rock and we just give each other a nod, and it's like, all right, we got this, let's do this.
I mean, it's an amazing thing, and obviously the songs are very well known. The film is very well known, and most of the audience will probably already know it. Now, we know in the West End, lots of people have been singing songs. There's been a big, divide over audiences singing or not. Do you get that? Is that something that bothers you, or you welcome it?
No, they don't actually sing, but we do get from the audience on occasion they'll clap. That's slightly out of time at times. But you know what though? But the thing is, they're enjoying it and they've invested, and you're like, they're with us. So I don't mind that. Do you know what I mean? They'll clap and they're enjoying themselves. From the beginning, they're invested in the whole thing. And I'm like, yes, this, so it's something I actually love to hear.
So you don't have that issue of people I think it was in The Bodyguard where people sing along to the "I Will Always Love You."
Yeah, no, we don't get that. But we do get the claps.
I think it's slightly different singing Hakuna Matata than "I Will Always Love You." I think there's certainly a different vocal ability needed. Also, we're here for them, not the other way around. And I think it's important as actors that we remember that.
And I mean, I suppose the question is, you've done 15 years. How many more? 15 more? What are you?
As long as possible. I can speak on behalf of George as well, but he's here. But we love it. I love working with him. I love working with the company. I love the whole organisation.
Eventually, there'll come a time, when Scar comes out in his Zimmer frame. You'll think,
in my wheelchair.
Yeah, exactly. the confrontation between Scar and Mufasa takes half an hour to get there. That obviously there will come a natural time, but hopefully not just yet. I love it. I love it. And I think, and maybe when I finally think I've got it right, it's time to finish. But I don't think I've got it right 100% yet.
Well, brilliant. Shaun, George, thank you so much for taking the time. And congratulations on 15 years and for many more in the future as well.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Coming up right after this short break, we're off to see The Wizard of Oz at the Palladium. See you in a minute.
I'm Millie Alcock, and you're listening to the Evening Standard Theatre podcast.
Welcome back.
Our second review this week is The Wizard of Oz at the Palladium. Nancy, you've seen this, so was The Wizard wonderful or not?
Look, this was not made for me. Right? But, you're not going to be surprised. It's The Wizard of Oz just because. And I think, just because presumably it's going to make an enormous amount of money. It was completely packed. It was a Friday night. Loads of kids scoffing sweets, loads of parents and grown-up ladies on a night out, guzzling Prosecco. It was great. Everyone was having a really good time. I wasn't. But there was a standing ovation at the end. Everyone was in blah, 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 blah. Okay, fine. The point is, it wasn't made for me. It absolutely could have been, to absolutely no detriment of the production whatsoever, and it would have made it better. So much money has been thrown at this. It is unbelievable, but nobody seems to realise that you don't need to be able to see all the money. I don't know what you think, Nick. You saw it and you reviewed it, but I think the direction is really lazy.
Yeah, it's directed by Nikolai Foster, who is the sort of coming man in the musical scene, and this came in from The Curve, I think.
Yeah, Curve in
Leicester.
Where he's the artistic director.
Right, yes, there we go. So it's sort of based on L. Frank Baum's original book. It sort of references the famous 1939 film. It's very hard to talk about authenticity with The Wizard of Oz because there were 13
loads
books,
of different versions.
3 film versions before they even filmed one with sound, I believe, and then the 1939 one that everybody knows. And also, I mean, let's face it, The Wizard of Oz makes no sense anyway. But the best of
there
times.
isn't actually a story, I realise, with it. Well, not very much.
Not very much of one. I mean, hardly any of one. This is updated slightly with some new songs by Andrew Lloyd Webber in 2011. The Palladium is his theatre. I think this is very much his show. I agree. I mean, I think this sort of feels like a show created by robots somehow.
It's ridiculous. Like, all the money has been spent on toys. Just mean like overstimulating, unnecessary toys.
Well, it's been spent on toys. It's also been spent on the cast, and you feel this has been cast by the same algorithm that casts the pantos at the Palladium, where you sort of go, oh, Jason Manford will bring in a certain crowd if you cast him as the lion, the Cowardly Lion, and Ashley Banjo will bring in another sector of the population if you have him as the Tin Man. Georgina Onura, who I think is very good as Dorothy, again, she sort of brings a new spin and perhaps a new demographic into to the show. But I mean, it's a very sort of slick, hollow piece of entertainment.
Like, they're all in different shows. They're all doing their absolute best.
Yeah.
Like, they really are. And the voices are fantastic. They've got some knockout voices in there. I especially with it, quite like Louis, I think it must be Louis, I'm not sure, but Louis Gaunt, who's playing the Scarecrow, acting with every fibre of his being at every single moment of the show. Given a sort of diligent and imaginative director, he could probably do it brilliantly, and it would probably really knit together nicely as relationships between characters. But he's throwing out this massive performance night after night with absolutely no chance of standing out because of this onslaught of visual noise.
Yes.
The Yellow Brick Road is a kind of bunch of weird constructions that they have to clamber all over. It doesn't work at all. It's just an obstacle on the stage. There's this big sign of Wicked Witch Industries, which is just a weird, lazy shorthand.
Which makes
gives
no
you
sense
absolutely
whatsoever.
no explanation.
So
makes no sense whatsoever. It's just stick a castle on there. That's all we need to know. No time has been spent making that universe make sense. I mean, I realise it's not that easy to make it make sense, but it is easy to cut out the crap that makes no damn sense.
Yeah, and they have added to the crap that makes no damn sense. It's true. There's a mixture of physical props and projections, aren't there? And there's it's really sort of quite inconsistent. At times things look quite steampunk. The Kansas scenes look quite macabre, sort of American Gothic, don't they, originally? But then you're transported to Oz, which initially looks like Metropolis, and then it's suddenly turned into this awful sort of consumer nightmare where everything is called an Ozbucks or an Ozdonalds.
I know, it's just, but that's the thing. If you're going to use video projections, use them in a clever way and in a beautiful way, instead of just using them as a showcase for your cleverly fun ideas. The scenes in Oz, they're just this distracting Easter egg hunt for grown-ups. With the fun little Oz-themed riffs on brand names that you mentioned and references to Judy Garland. It's
the Good Witch seems to have come out of the Barbie movie for some reason.
And also,
on her scooter,
I'm sorry, poor old Linda, on this pink scooter, the way she's sitting on it, sort of side saddle, she doesn't look like a cool witch with a mod moped. She looks like an old witch with a mobility scooter. It's really weird. She sort of comes on at the end, riding this little scooter, and then she's like, oh, you've always had the power to go home, and then just sort of zooms off like grandma. It's really weird.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said in my review of this that it's sort of exhausting. I thought it was a very professional piece of entertainment, but that I'm aware is very faint praise. Like you say, I think the voices are good, the singing is good. The new songs aren't really a patch on the originals, but there are only really 4 songs in the original.
That's true.
So it's not much.
They are the moments that you really enjoy because you go, oh, she's doing Somewhere Over the Rainbow, brilliant. And there's sort of a weird thing I noticed because when she started singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow the first time, I didn't really recognise the beginning. And so I was like, oh, I don't know what this is, a bit boring. And then she sort of cranked up into Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And there's some sort of weird Proustian response where I was a bit like, it's Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And I felt really like weirdly moved for no reason. And I was absolutely baffled by it.
In a way, isn't that the Wizard of Oz itself? What is it that keeps bringing all these audiences in and packing it out?
It's that line. It's that single damn line.
I saw this in July when Pride was on.
Right.
And I think that, gave it a bit of an extra boost, really. That it's very rainbow themed.
Yeah.
The design of this, there's a real acknowledgement of what this story has come to mean to gay men over the years.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, in the sense of, if there is a message to The Wizard of Oz, it's sort of about self-realisation and being yourself and realising your place in your own backyard, isn't it, really?
And being empowered by all of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. But I just sort of feel like all of that sort of gets lost in this just kind of carnage, this visual carnage that you're stuck with. I just want to say, though, Jason Manford, total surprise, really good voice.
Yeah,
really good
he has
voice.
got a good voice. He's weirdly doing a version of John Lahr as the lion.
I know. I was like, he's a
very
well-known comedian from Salford. Why is the lion from New York? It's really, and also totally weird and pointless. Give him Jason Manford's accent. And then for that matter, why are the inhabitants of Oz American?
Yes.
She's just come from Kansas to a magical country.
They
could sound like anything.
Why are the flying monkeys Hell's Angels in
no,
this
that was
iteration?
They also had the face of one of the characters from Gorillaz. Like, did you notice? I was
Yes.
I think that. Are you sure? Is that
Yeah.
a copyright thing? I don't know.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'd just like to make a quick word for Gary Wilmot, who
inevitably appears.
Inevitably appears. But I just love Gary Wilmot. This is just sort of guarantee that he's going to turn up. He's going to do exactly what's required. He's going to go home, put his feet up, and
and he's got a lovely gap between the moment he comes into the first act and then the moment he comes in the second.
That can be a danger for actors. There was in the book I An Actor by Nigel Planer, in his persona as Nicholas Craig, this very sort of vainglorious actor, he refers to a condition called Laertes' elbow, which is to do with being off stage for 2.5 hours in the middle of the play and tends to mean you sort of dodder around a bit when you finally go back on and slay your words somewhat.
One for the school holidays?
Yeah.
We could say
I mean, take the kids, by all means. Take the kids because they will probably absolutely love it, especially if they've seen the movie before. The music makes the scary bits feel a little bit scary, but actually the flying monkeys are nothing like as scary as they are in the movie because they really are bloody scary. And, it will pass an evening. It's not too long. The second half is very short.
Yes.
It's about 35 minutes or something. Yeah. It's really sort of, so when you do go in there and you're like, how long until I can have a martini? It's not very long.
Yeah, true.
And that's it for this week's Evening Standard Theatre podcast.
Well, nearly. I just want to flag that we've had our first 5-star theatre review from Edinburgh. Tim Bano has been up there for us, and he was blown away by a show at Summerhall called Woodhill. It's really hard-hitting. Nick, I think you know the company behind it, don't you?
Yes, Lung Theatre are a brilliant, brilliant theatre company. They're described as a campaign-led theatre company, and they do verbatim theatre. They have done since 2016 when they did a piece about the Bradford City Football Club fire. And they've done a number of shows since then, really pushing the verbatim form, and Tim talks about in his review actually of Woodhill that this pushes the verbatim form even further. But one that I really remember is Who Cares, which was a piece done with young carers, often hidden. A lot of people didn't know about them, even schools or whatever, and they worked with young carers who are looking after parents or whoever, dependents, whoever it may be, and told this extraordinary story, and then not only took it around theatres around the country but also schools, and they ended up performing at the House of Lords, and they started a campaign to sort of find all the hidden young carers out there. And it was an extraordinary piece of work, and they're an extraordinary company. So I'm delighted that this show has got our first 5-star review. So that's great. I really hope it comes to London.
Yeah, definitely. Anyway, you can find that review and all our latest reviews at standard.co.uk. That's also linked below.
Thanks as always to our producer Rachel Abbott.
And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss it. We'll see you next week.